permission to let our viewers know what exactly happened and the reasons for withdrawal of this letter?
Well, I mean, I think I do not want to comment about General Fonseca because I should not do so in this present position. We have very clear instructions. I think the simple fact is that the leader interview created a tremendous embarrassment. And Philip Alston, who tends to shout at Sri Lanka whenever he's given the slightest opportunity to do so, he's an exceptional person. You know, many people even find him strange the way he behaves in the UN, not us. He promptly barked at us. And I felt I should deal with that bark. But of course I also needed to recognize that the leader did not withdraw the story. So that while my response to Philip Alston was in a sense an attempt to stop him persecuting Sri Lanka. Because it's not, Philip Alston persecuting is all right, but then what happens is that the world starts saying the UN is attacking us. I'm so grateful that Ban Ki-moon has made it now very clear that Philip Alston is not the UN. But if you look at a lot of the media coverage, Philip Alston says something, he's Philip Alston. Philip Alston is someone who reports to the UN. Then the UN takes a decision. But the media present him as the UN. UN says ABC. And that is very damaging to Sri Lanka. So that any way in which Philip Alston gets a handle to attack us is negative. And I'm afraid the leader interview created that handle. Now, unfortunately, Mrs. Jayans has not withdrawn the interview. And looking at it more carefully, you find that on page 4, there are things that, if taken seriously, could lead to a lot of trouble. Now, I think Mrs. Jayans also obviously was in difficulty because when I spoke to her first, she was absolutely adamant that she stood by her story, but said there was a clarification. Now later when I tried to call her after Alston's letter came, she wasn't answering her phone. Now that's very unusual in Frederica Jayans because she's normally a very brave lady. So I think she was feeling that something had gone wrong. So she wasn't talking to us. She was dodging calls. That's so unusual. So that embarrassment which the country had to face was, I think, a pity. But as I said, let me say squarely, the leader article was an enormous problem. And it would be good if Frederica herself made it very clear what the position was. From what she said the next time round, she's still standing entirely by her story. So I'm afraid we don't know what Alston will do next. He's a very unpredictable customer, as we know from Channel 4.
Yes, now that's the thing about Channel 4, it's like after a long period of silence, he has returned to us with the Channel 4 video. So what is your take on the presidential election and the second coming of Mr. Alston? So
I think let me say categorically that Mr. Alston has been trying to embarrass Sri Lanka thoroughly. Mr. Alston in May sent a letter, and normally I reply promptly. That has been the practice. But I delayed by a week because there was a lot of work that was a period in May. And there were 2 holidays. And he issued a press release. And I told Mr. Alston, why do you issue a press release? The normal practice is you send a letter and we reply. Oh, it took a long time to reply. I said, 1 week? Sometimes he never replies my letters for months. So he's obviously trying to embarrass Sri Lanka. And I think this has been his practice. It's likely a pity. I've asked him once why he was doing this, and he said, your ambassador came at me like a bulldog, so I thought I should do the same back to. And I said, which ambassador? It was a lady. But it turned out that that lady felt very upset because one of his reports, which he refused to give Sri Lanka, had been leaked. Now, Alston assured me he did not leak it, and I'm sure he's correct. But the report was leaked, and he did not bother to check how it was leaked, and was very embarrassing to Sri Lanka. So there are people, he or his staff, who want to embarrass us. Same with Channel 4. Of course, the absolutely fascinating thing is that he now says he conducted an inquiry into the video, which he should have done in the first place without talking about it. He issued a letter on the strength of the video and went public without having checked the video. Now, Nathan Pillai, the High Commissioner, told us, I would not have written a letter on the strength of a video. So at least he's now bothered to check. But if you look at the material that he's checked on, it's all very subjective. It's a bit like the Times. The Times said we looked at the video, and what they say is, the man died in a way that was so convincing it couldn't have been false. Now, we are not here to check on acting. We are not saying that this acting is good and that acting is bad and so on. We are looking at technicalities. And the really funny thing about the Alston report, this latest, is that he says there are 3 things that are unexplained. There's a strange date, but you can put any date you like. Now, why would a video that it purports to be made in January have a July date? It doesn't explain it. There are 17 frames that are not there. So I think he's a man who, is really not very serious. How can you say he's a video that has been tampered with a little bit, but it's generally authentic? Not convincing.
But what do you think is the actual purpose of this whole exercise?
Well, Alston is a bit of a nutcase. He's a bit of a vindictive person. Last year, he attacked America and NATO. And the poor American ambassador in Geneva was almost hysterical in answering Alston and accusing him of bad faith. So he's a man who likes sensationalism.
Right. So we are speaking to Professor Rajiva Wijesinghe, Secretary to the Ministry of Disaster Management and Human Rights. We will take a short break and we'll be back with you.